This week in the world, Cenat was witness to an in-person hanging. Turns out the champ doesn't do what the champ wants, as Mcgregor has been convicted, and Lily Allen and Kate Nash are allegedly forced onto OnlyFans. Starting off with extremely bad news for Jaguar car owners. You will no longer be given side-eye because you have a 16-year-old Taiwanese lady next to your 35-year-old bald R driving 120 miles down the freeway, but rather because your car is now considered gay. Sorry liberals, this is the new era. At least you will be following the brand's redesign that has sent the internet into a frenzy of sorts. The brand, who is associated with the clientele I have just mentioned, no longer wants that stigma associated with their name, and has gone into a new direction, the woke direction if online critics are to be believed, dropping this advertisement as part of their new Copy Nothing initiative. Paired with a very nice and very sexy logo that, I mean this as nicely as possible, looks like the imprint design of a tampon brand. And or dildo, but I don't want to sound crude. But I really don't think it's that crude considering they both do the same thing, which is making my starter wife feel something, as she keeps reminding me. Much like my relationship over the years, this rework was not interpreted very well, with many online critics saying that this isn't Jaguar, it's ugly and it's gay. A point I don't agree with, as Jaguar is very well known for having ugly cars, and also being gay. Raw Don Glover, the brainchild behind this endeavor, has struck back against these naysayers, clapping back and defending the brand's new direction, with making particular focus on hitting back against far-right nationalist Nigel Farage, who was very vocally criticizing the company on Twitter, stating the following: "I predict Jaguar will now go bust, and you know what? They deserve it too." To which Glover was quick to respond in a public statement that the average age of a Jaguar client is old, no duh, and are just getting older. We've got to access a completely different audience. That audience isn't centered around people of the demographic of Mr. Farage. In other words, the world is a new old man. We now make cars for girls who pretend to be bisexual, and 5 free guys who debate politics online with blue hair. I understand the new direction they're heading in, as it does make sense that you want to move away from an older demographic, especially if you want to see sales in the future, which you most likely will not because of that association with your brand. But that doesn't mean that you take a dump on the people who are currently buying your cars as well. You know, on your way out, it makes sense what Glover's trying to say, he's just saying it in the wrong way. If you want to get younger generations hooked on your product, the key is to appeal to them on a one-to-one level by slowly manipulating with products they might have interest in, at least in my view. In other news, the champ can't do what the champ wants, as Conor McGregor has officially been labeled by law as a rapist, following his loss of a civil trial against Nikita Han, 35-year-old that claimed she was assaulted by McGregor in a hotel room in 2018. It was stated by lawyers representing Miss Han that McGregor was angry about losing a fight 2 months prior, and as such took it out on Miss Han in a Dublin hotel room. It was further claimed that McGregor had pinned her down to her bed and at some point placed her into a chokehold 3 separate times, before stating, "Now you know how I felt in the octagon." Okay? McGregor's team, on the other hand, claimed that both himself and Miss Han had shared 2 consensual nights together, with nothing more taking place. It is important to remember, although that McGregor has lost the case, it is extremely likely that he will win upon reappeal, when you consider the fact that the case is a civil matter and not a criminal one, meaning the burden of proof is much lower and juries decide based on the likelihood of events and not over the substantial burden of proof. In other words, it's a complete he said, she said situation for the most part, and it just so happens to go Miss Han's way, as there was an overwhelming female jury majority on the deck, with 8 women and 4 men. Now, I want to state for the record, I am not on this man's side. He is a piece of shit, and is genuinely just a public menace, so I wouldn't put it past him if he did in fact rape Miss Han, but I am just telling you what is most likely going to happen. Like my reaction to that detail of Mr. McGregor apparently choke holding this woman 3 separate times, and specifically saying this is because of my fight that I lost, through question marks onto my own opinion. I imagine the same thing will happen with a different jury. As it stands now, Conor's being forced to hand over £260,000, and he might even have to cover Miss Han's legal costs, but that has yet to be determined. So now we wait and see. In more lawsuit news, Drake has finally had enough and is putting his cartoon foot down with a boing, making the choice to sue Kendrick Lamar, technically and more broadly sue UMG and Spotify, for allegedly inflating streams of his hit song, Not Like Us. As you might recall, or not depending on how close you skid that delicious N-word line, when nobody is around of course, if an N-bob is said in the woods, does anybody really hear it? I certainly do, because I'm yelling it. But back on track, the celebrated music artist Kendrick Lamar Lamar and the world-famous Drake were beefing through poetry, triggered by J. Cole of all people when he claimed that the two aforementioned rappers and himself were the big three of the rap genre. A statement that Kendrick was not inclined to agree with, noting a long line of diss tracks and beefs, which ended in a pretty much unanimous Kendrick Lamar victory. Look that boy a lot. Now, his overwhelming victory could have been the result of his superior musical ability and the fact that he is in fact an award-winning writer, or as Drake and his litigation company called Frozen Moments LLC allege, it is actually in fact due to conspiring between Kendrick, UMG, and Spotify, who organized a manipulative campaign to push Kendrick's music to the forefront, with Drake's litigation team going as far to claim the company violated the Racketeer, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act, in other words, a RICO case, which is typically only reserved for organized crime. How Drake and his team are able to lay these accusations is due to the fact that both artists are associated with Universal Music Group, and by default, Spotify as a result. It is for that very reason that makes the lawsuit somewhat legitimate, albeit ridiculous. For the long and short of it, in less legal terms, Drake and his lawyers believe that UMG, alongside Spotify, deliberately pushed Kendrick's music over his own, specifically relating to the aforementioned song. The most fascinating of all is how they claim UMG achieved this, as Drake's attorneys claim that they carried out this scheme in a variety of ways, including by charging Spotify vastly reduced licensing rates in exchange for the streamer recommending the song to users who had searched for unrelated songs and artists, as well as claiming that UMG paid influencers to boost the song on social media, as well as hiring armies of bots to spike the numbers. The first point I will concede may have some legs, but the influencer one is just a dead duck. Lad, that's just standard practice across the board for all major artists and albums. Now look, I may not be from the streets. The closest I ever get to it is when I walk across the road if a black guy's approaching me. And as someone who formerly lived in Africa, bro, you knew I was zigzagging. But if I may be so bold as to hit the head with the nail, that's a weird way of saying it, Kendrick Lamar accused you of being a serial misogynist, a deadbeat father, an associate kitty diddler, and you clap back by suing him not for defamation, but rather because you lost. Dude, you have to shoot the man. It's the only way you can redeem yourself at this point. For the first time in his career in England, Pep Guardiola is struggling to find form both domestically and abroad, as the world's objectively best team has lost 6 games on the bounce, being throttled by Spurs twice, which just never happens to anybody, as Spurs can barely be considered a real team, losing 2-1 to Bournemouth and Brighton alike, before getting spit on their hole from Sporting, and somehow drawing a massive 3-0 lead against Feyenoord, though not everything seems to be going simpatico. Although not necessarily a sign of doom and gloom at the club, who currently sit second in their local league, and are still holding on quite firmly to a playoff spot in the Champions League, but compared to their gold standard of football that they're used to, it might be a shock to Baldy's system. Although I must admit it's a bit of a welcome one to the larger footballing world, as it has been very enjoyable to watch Manchester United eat shit for years. We are now starting to run the risk of becoming a farmers league, with Man City winning the title every single year, much like Bayern Munich used to. So thankfully, for now at least, it seems that Liverpool is on track to win the entire league and lift that stranglehold they've had on the tournament for so long now. Now, for some time, I've had a fascination with the land down under. Their silly people and their silly sayings always make me chuckle, and it's always helpful to have a guilt-free conscience whenever you need to laugh at an ethnic group for your entertainment, because seriously, all of Australian slang is silly, with either an and, an icky, or an e finishing it off. I was down at the Grago for a pack of ciggies after I ate my brekkie with mummy and diddy. But I'm also fascinated by their weird-ass parliament, and their really weird-ass laws that get pushed forward like literally all of the time. Like this new bill that has passed all of the legal proceedings to put it in effect of banning anybody under the age of 16 from social media, with social media companies facing a massive fine for non-compliance. Crazy enough though, unlike most bans, exemption isn't even an option, and we could see all current underage users banned as a result. As it is unclear what platforms will face the heaviest chopping of the block, but I could guess the apps with the most addictive feedback loops and the biggest hits of dopamine would be hit the hardest. But as of right now, that has not been clarified and will be decided upon by the communications minister at a later date. This change is a welcome one according to parents of activist groups within the nation, with Miss Amy Friedland, a lobbyist for the decision, saying, "For too long, parents have had the impossible choice between giving in and getting their child an addictive device, or seeing their child isolated and feeling left out. Or, you could just parent your child and find a lovely little balance in between, but it's easier to take the coward's way out U-turn." If I were to give my 2 cents on how realistically this ban is actually going to work, I would say it's not too dissimilar from my penis in a room full of naked women. Can't even get it up. The Aussies already have an insanely strict set of laws relating to video games that are are too violent for them, but yet somehow there are still kids on them. With this bypass to accessing social media being an even easier option by just using a VPN. Not to mention having to put your ID in every single time you want to use TikTok or have a wank would probably frustrate 20-somethings adult Aussies. And as a result of frustrating, your basic voter block, I'm sure this will get overturned in no time. Now, could you be at risk of having to flash your bumhole as a musician? If you are a successful musician, the trick is to show them everything but the speckled hen. But if you're a failing one or one with dwindling fame, you could be at risk of spreading the whole kebab. At least if Lily Allen and Kate Nash are to be believed. Allen, who you might be familiar with, is the sister of Reek from Game of Thrones, and enjoyed a decent level of success as an artist in the early noughts, as quite literally just an Amy Winehouse clone. Since her fame has somewhat faded, she has now taken to selling pictures on OnlyFans. She was quoted as saying, "I'm finding this actually quite empowering. Having been sexualized from a very early age and literally everybody else in the process profiting from that sexualization, it's actually really fun to be like in power and in control of something that I find so silly." Really? Are you for real? You're claiming the bullshit line that somehow selling feet pictures to perverts is empowering? And also, bro, what do you mean everybody else profited off you? You profited off you. Shut the fuck up. But moving off Allen, who actually doesn't need the money, seeing that she's married to successful actor David Harbour, we go back to Nash, who was also an Amy Winehouse clone, but for some reason never found success, and basically never had any solo hits to speak of. But she is still trying her damnedest to keep those lights on, by now selling photos of her bum on OnlyFans to fund her tours. She stated her butts for tour buses page was in order to ensure good wages and safe means of travel for my band and crew. No need to stream my music, I'm good for that 0.003 of a penny per stream, thanks. Nash, inspired to putting a brave face on, seems rather bitter. Going on further to state, "Don't be sad that I started an OnlyFans to fund my tours. It's very empowering." Stop lying. Stop lying to yourself. "Selling pics of my ass is fun and funny." She also said her ass is shining a light on the problem, that music has little to no value. God, I'm sad. Because I can tell, through reading this, Nash is sad about how her career went. No, there's nothing empowering about selling your body parts online, bro. You're too proud to admit that. And then you act as if the audience is somehow the problem by saying the music has little to no value. Well, yeah, some music doesn't, and it's yours. I mean, part of me feels really bad for these two because they fell for that industry trap, because they were told they were going to be like the next big thing and they were going to be everywhere. And in Alan's case, it was partly true, but for Nash, that just didn't happen, simply because she came at the wrong time. Her music was getting pushed as the streaming revolution came into swing, so her cuck music that most people wouldn't listen to, bar the executives she signed with, who were trying to push her as a Winehouse clone, could no longer get the plays on the radio for her, and therefore she wasn't in the rotation of the 5 songs they used to play. In other words, tastemakers no longer exist, bar the popular culture in of itself. And as such, you realize that your music that you thought was great never really appealed to as many people as you thought. I'm not saying that that doesn't still happen in some cases. Chappelle Rowan is a psyop in full swing, but you weren't a lucky one. Be honest about it. I'm a 25-year-old failing YouTuber who is currently going to university with 18-year-olds. Sometimes it's cool to admit you're a loser. With dwindling careers on the stovetop of conversation, we have Dr. Diddle the Kids announcing his moves to the streaming platform Rumble. In other words, my friend, this is the end. Hold your breath while I stroke to 10. Feel my balls throb again. I'm gonna have to make a mental note of a gay version of Skyfall that is to be written and recorded by me. Rumble, as you might be aware, is basically a worse version of Kick. This sudden, surprising move came after a failed reapplication to monetization. With brands no longer willing to work with him and him being banned off Twitch, it seems as the good doctor is running out of legroom. The deal struck with Rumble will see non-exclusive streaming rights with the platform, meaning he is free to go as he pleases if and when any reputable platform will have him back. He is also negotiated in this deal to receive equity within the company following certain streaming milestones, and he will even head up an advisory role within the company for a division known as the Champions Club Community, which I speculate will probably be a division focusing on what the needs of game streamers are. Time will tell whether or not he will be able to keep hands to himself, so again, we wait and see. In our final story of the day, the probably only valid streamer that I can think of in terms of entertainment value, Cenat, has had a bit of an incident, to be nice about it. 22-year-old and doesn't it feel bad to say that age out loud, showed a live hanging of sorts on his subathon live stream dubbed the Fun 2, a massive long live stream that lasts a whole month, featuring many celebrity guests, as well as large events in order to keep the interest of viewers. One of these events entailed a visit from magic YouTuber Mcgregor, who pulled a stunt that Cenat was allegedly not aware of, that being hanging himself. Although the footage is out there, I can unfortunately not play that for obvious reasons, but using the theater of the mind, I'm sure you can imagine based off my descriptions. To begin the stunt, Cenat was led to a basketball court where Max was stood waiting for him, with 3 nooses lined up in the background that Max then proceeds to place his head into one of them, and then instructed Mr. Cenat to pull one of the 3 cords associated with the 3 nooses. Max then encouraged Mr. Cenat to pull one of the cords, at which point Max would simulate a hanging before dropping to the ground. Stunt was apparently unexpected by Mr. Cenat, who claimed he wasn't aware of what would transpire, specifically stating, "Max told my team that he was doing a whole other thing at the end. It was nothing related to that, then he did that." In the immediate aftermath, Cenat was heard panicking over possibly being banned before attempting to get a hold of Max so the magician could explain his actions. As of right now, the streamer has not been banned, nor any official statements have been put forward by Twitch, so it seems he has gotten away with it as of right now, with of course a couple of bitch boy mumblings about, but them's the haters. And speaking of haters, I know you are not one. So a big thank you as always for watching, hit that subscribe button, and I shall see you next week for a dose of news. Bye bye.